I left them behind when I came out by myself. I left my family behind.
I got a new world in my view. Lord, my journey I pursue. I said I'm running for the city. I got the new world in my view. I got the new world in my view. Oh, my journey I pursue. Lord, I'm running for the city. I got the new world in my view.
Get it while I'm living. All I ever hear is the clock tick, tick, ticking. So I'm about my business and I'm running with it now. They don't wanna give it up, we gon' make it out.
For the first 10 years of Simón Queveto's childhood, he lived a comfortable life along the coast of Venezuela. But everything changed when his family was persecuted for their political beliefs. Their only option was to seek asylum in America.
It was very stressful to kind of like be put as an outcast and like that. It really wasn't that cool. After that, we had to like get moving, and my dad had to come here, and that's how it all started. My dad had a very good job. He worked at the oil refinery.
Then all the industry, we started kind of protesting that type of things, and at the end it was a national strike.
It was just like a movement. Like you would go outside and like have a march and like just things like that. My dad was involved in a lot of that.
In that time, they laid off 20,000 professionals.
My dad was laid off or fired, and because the second time that you had to vote, my dad didn't vote for Chavez because he voted after the first term he was not a good president, so he didn't vote for him again, and that was all on a list.
Those who did not vote to re-elect Chavez were placed on a blacklist, which stripped them of many freedoms, such as the access to food and the possibility of employment, with large repercussions looming over their heads at all times.
When we were living with my grandma, my mom would sometimes go out and like try to buy food. I remember this one time because like it was raining, and she went to go get food. She had to walk there, and then she just like walked all the way back because they didn't give her food because of like our situation.
So it was a very kind of a nightmare at the end.
Asylees and refugees both have to meet the definition of what a refugee is, and that's someone who fears persecution in their home country based on their race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group. The person has to have a subjective fear of returning, but they also need to prove that there's an objective fear, and usually that's providing documentation that shows what the client has explained is happened to them is probable to have happened in the country based on conditions.
You have to demonstrate that you have a well-founded or credible fear of what's happening in your country.
There's sort of the way that the asylum process is explained by the U.S. government and then the actual process.
The application asks for a lot of biographic information. Where did you go to school? Where have you worked? Where did you live? And trying to piece that together can be difficult, particularly when, it says, what street did you live on? And there are no streets in the country that you came from.
The goal of the judge is to make their decision within 6 months of applying. This puts an extra stress on the applicant, who's required to gather evidence which is sometimes impossible to obtain.
You must be able to corroborate any evidence that's reasonably obtainable, and if you can't, then you need to explain.
In my case, I had press clips and TV interviews recorded. So.
It can be very challenging if they're trying to gather documents from home to support their case, and it takes a while to gather things and get them sent over.
Beyond gathering physical evidence, clients must provide consistent recounts of their struggles in their home country.
We're asking them to tell us about the most horrific thing that happened to them in their life and in a great amount of detail. Adjudicators often see the more detailed you are, the more credible you are. What we know about psychology is that the memory is a very fluid thing and is not always that consistent, and then adding trauma onto it can certainly make it challenging.
My dad, my mom, and I, we all had our visas and our passports. But for my little brother, the Venezuelan government refused to give him papers, so he didn't have a passport or a visa. So they had to file a bunch of paperwork so my little brother could get his passport, and then we could come. So that took like 2 years, almost 2 years for us to be able to come here. If I would have stayed back home, I would probably not keep going through school because my dad wouldn't have had a job. Like, it would have just all gone downhill. So I'm very glad that my parents decided to come here.
There are a lot of, I would say, inefficiencies in the system, and there's also a lot of sort of justice or inequality. One judge will grant asylum applications something like 90% of the time. You might have another judge in the same system in the same state who will only give asylum 9% of the time. So then it's a little bit just of luck of the draw of who's deciding your case.
And I would say the political opinion claims are probably the most common. Some religious claims, a lot of those that belong to this particular social group, gender-based claims, so some domestic violence, maybe forced marriage, a practice in a number of African countries, female genital mutilation is a number of claims, sexual orientation from a number of countries.
Simone's family was lucky to have been able to come to America. Unfortunately, only 27% of applicants are granted asylum.
By eliminating filing deadlines, increasing the number of immigration judges, and improving access to legal counsel, Congress can vastly improve the process of gaining asylum in America.
Although only Congress has the power to change the laws, you have the power to influence Congress. Before anything will change, people need to recognize the problem.
I got a new world in my view. Lord, my journey I pursue. I said I'm running for the city. I got the new world in my view. I got the new world in my view. Oh, my journey I pursue. Lord, I'm running for the city. I got the new